the Cress theory of color confrontation and martial arts. I'm going to go ahead and make this before somebody beats me to it because I think people are going to get to it. Real quick, if you don't know what the Cress theory is, please get the book The ISIS Papers by Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing. And if you don't know what martial arts are, please grab a dictionary and look up the term martial arts. Now, to basically summarize the Cress theory for those who don't know or those who need a review, it basically says that racist white supremacists are threatened by black male genitalia. And the way I'm going to apply the Cress theory to martial arts is in the area of sport, because Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing's theory is that ball games reflect the white male feeling of genetic inadequacy in the presence of black male genetic material, which is represented by the black man's testicles or the black man's balls. Now, how I will apply this to martial arts is as follows. If you say that the black male's genetic material is a measure of strength, virility, or masculinity, you also do not have to just look at the testicles, you also have to look at the phallus. Okay. The gun is something that Dr. Cress-Welsing feels, because its phallic shape is representative of the phallus of the black male genitalia. Now, in the martial arts, what do we have that could be considered like a phallus? Across practically all styles, we have belts. The belt, that's right. The belt can be looked at as a phallic symbol. Now, if you don't believe me, here's a more modern cultural reference, as you might remember, for a belt being a phallic symbol. If you've ever seen Family Guy, and it's one episode, I can't remember which one it was, where Quagmire talks about impotency. He says, I think someone's going to get, he's going to get snipped, going to get cut so that he can't have kids anymore. What is that procedure called? I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember. But anyway, someone's going to get the male procedure to get cut so he can't have children anymore. And Quagmire says, basically, why would you do that? If you don't have potency, I'm paraphrasing, if you don't have potency, you don't have a phallus. You basically have a belt. So he's saying that a phallic shaped thing that doesn't have direct potency is a belt. Okay. Now, if we look at the belts in the martial arts, they are worn around the waist and they dangle in the front. The extensions of the belt in the martial arts dangles in the front next to the male phallus. It's almost like you're adding two phalluses to the one that males have, human males have. This is the only area I know of where a belt is tied in the front and the extension of the belt hangs downward in the front, in the same place as the male genitalia. When a lot of students, I've noticed, when they first put on their belt, they want to put it on so that the extension either dangles to the side, mostly to the side or the back, because that's what's most comfortable. But no, in the essence of the martial arts, the belt dangles to the front. Now, how can this be a reflection of racism and white supremacy? The most sought after belt in the martial arts is the black belt. One could argue that under a system of racism and white supremacy, this is a representation of how black genetic material is sought after to be acquired, dominated, or controlled. So in a sense, one seeks out the black belt to become more masculine or manly, to have the same power or masculinity that people feel the black male has. What is the weakest, or should I say, least respected belt in the martial arts? The white belt. That could be reflective of how the white phallus is viewed as having the least genetic potential. Now, if you notice, as you ascend up in the ranks of the martial arts, the belt colors get darker. They go from white to yellow or orange. Sometimes you may have green or blue in there, purple, brown, and then black. So typically the highest level across all martial arts, the black belt is the highest belt. I know there's an exception. I'm going to get to that in a minute. However, you may think that, well, the martial arts that you're thinking of that uses belts, these were developed by Asian people. So it has nothing to do with the racism that we're talking about in Western countries. That is an excellent counter, but I disagree. Because if you look at Cress theory, and if you look at Neely Fuller Jr.'s United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, which is the inspiration for Dr. Welsing's ISIS papers, everyone who is not white is under a system of racism, white supremacy. I am not 100% sure that the people we call Asian are the ones who actually came up with this black belt system. I believe they are. I believe it was Dr. Jigoro Kano from Judo who actually came up with the black belt system. That still does not mean that he was not subconsciously reflecting the views held by the system of racism and white supremacy. Because if you look at Japanese history, Japan was one of the few countries that as soon as they met the Westerners, they changed everything. They adopted the Western mindset, and I believe that Japan has often been called the white men. They call themselves the white men of the East. Not only that, at the time of this recording, the people in Japan have a problem with their Miss Japan because she is part black. If they have a problem with Miss Japan being part black, and when I look at her as a black American, I can't really tell just glancing at her that she's mixed with African. I can't tell. She looks Japanese to me. So if they have a problem with a black person, because one drop here makes you black, and she just has a black parent, she's still very fair skinned, she's still very tall, she's a great looking girl. She still looks very Japanese to me, and she grew up in the Japanese culture. But they feel that that black parent, despite the fact that you really can't look at her and tell unless you're some kind of uber racist, racial purist here, you tell that she's not Japanese, and they feel like that doesn't represent their race. To me, that's an indicator that their society has adopted a lot of the principles of racism, white supremacy. And that's not a dart to throw at the Japanese, because my ethnic group, in my opinion, has adopted a lot of the same ideas of racism, white supremacy. A lot of people who aren't white have. We have the phenomenon of skin bleaching. Okay, now let me get back to the topic. So you have the white belt. Weakest belt, says novice, indicates lowest level of skill or power. You have the black belt, sought after belt, highest level of knowledge in most styles. Now, a lot of people say black belt is not the goal. Black belt is just the beginning. You get a black belt and move on. But you still have to get that black belt to be considered competent. Okay? Brown belt is considered almost competent, but black belt is that sought after belt that you tie and you dangle the extensions of the belt in front of you as if you are acquiring a new or two new phalluses in front of you. And white men have a history of removing black genitalia, the phallus, and the testes, and acquiring them as possessions. Okay, now, I mentioned earlier an exception. Here again, this also reflects racism, white supremacy, in my opinion. Because in some styles, you have a belt. First it was black belt. It's been black belt for a long time, okay? But after a while, the system of racism, white supremacy could not accept that. No, we can't have this black male phallic symbol being on top. We have to find a way to put the white phallic symbol back on top. So how do they do that? Ta-da! You create the red belt and the red and white belt in the grappling styles. In the striking styles, you have a red belt. In the grappling styles, you have the red or white belt. To me, that is an attempt of the white supremacist system to put white malehood back on top. So while the black malehood is, yes, it's strong, that black belt, now if you want to get beyond the ultimate level and get to the supreme or supremacist level, you must acquire the white belt. Not the white belt. You must acquire the red belt or the red and white belt. Now, you must acquire those. Now, what significance would that be if they're not exactly white, they're red and white? Well, according to Cress theory, just like you have in the United States flag, you have the colors red, white, and blue. Let's just abstract the phallus to red and white. We can assume, well, I'm going to assume because I don't know, because I haven't seen it, but one could assume that the white white phallus, I want to keep it totally clean. The white phallus, when in a state of arousal or friction or tension, the color probably turns red. Or the color is red and white. How do I suggest this? Because pale white skin is struck or rubbed real hard, it does turn red. I'm assuming that the most sensitive part of the male anatomy probably also turns red. I don't know. You'll have to verify that with someone who possesses that thing and ask them. I'm not going to ask them. You can ask them. But it doesn't nullify my argument. So, you want top level power, you get black belt, expert power, very strong power. But if you want supremacists, and if you know anything about the martial arts, only a very small group of people have a red or red and white belt. Yet, when you talk about the rank, it is still considered a black belt rank. Black in the system of white supremacy is considered power and powerful. So you have black belts. But because I think it's because of subconscious ego, they had to say, well, we're still going to assert what we want, what we are on top. So they came up with the red or red and white belts. You can argue all you want that in Asian cultures it means this, it means that. The martial arts have an origin that we know of. The martial arts that we tend to practice in the West have an origin in Asian culture. That doesn't mean they weren't created by Asian people, technically, because we can go to the walls of Beni Hassan in Egypt and look that up and see that they had grappling and other styles there too. But the version of martial arts that we tend to practice here in Western countries, although it comes from Asia, it is heavily influenced and controlled by the West. Very, very, very much so. Now let's take a trip on we're going to go to one particular style. Well, let me back up a second. Most of the head and hand gear that I see people wear in the martial arts for striking styles is red. Red like the red blood that you can see through the veins of pale white skin. I've usually seen red or blue gear covering. I rarely see any other colors but red, blue, or guess what? Black. Here again is the power. I rarely see anything else. I've seen pink too, but pink is also something that's kind of a sexual color. You want to look inside the female anatomy, pink. So this also goes back to, if you think about the idea of how fighting and sex are kind of related drives, in my opinion. But now I'm digressing. I'm going to come back to the point. Now let's take a look at judo. The uniforms I've seen worn in judo for contests are blue and white. Blue and white. Okay? Why blue and white? Blue and white, like the veins that you see on a pale white skin, similar to how red, white, and blue, if you read the ISIS papers, red, white, and blue is seen as a representation of white skin, white genitalia. So that means that if you're looking at a position of power, you have white-blooded people and the blue bloods. The blue bloods are an aristocratic branch. A lot of people call it blue blood. Those are the aristocrat white people, for lack of a better term. Please, I don't mean to offend. So you have blue bloods fighting against white people, okay? You also can look at it as the stage of a contest, of a judo contest, is a colored stage. And you have someone dressed in white fighting against someone dressed in blue, representative of the white and non-white color confrontation that takes place on planet Earth. All right? Now, if you look at the scoring in judo, it is done with the arm. When points are indicated, you stretch the arm out and up. The arm, when it's held stiff, many times an arm has been used as a euphemism for the male phallus. Now, a low quality score in judo, a medium quality score, it used to be you put your arm up in a small, tight fashion, kind of like a small, erect phallus. If a score is of middle quality, the arm comes out stiff, but it does not fully raise, like a not fully raised phallus, not fully erect phallus. A good quality score, the arm is raised parallel to the floor and fully stuck out to indicate the point. That is like a phallus that is almost erect. Okay. A full point score called the nippon, where the match is over, is indicated by raising the arm stiffly straight up in the air, or as straight as you're going to get it, like an erect phallus. Why would they do that? An indication of color confrontation and victory of genetic material. Some could also argue it's homoerotic. A lot of people have thrown that in there. Homoerotic, I don't necessarily buy so much, but it is indicated that way. And that's specifically for judo and Cress theory. Other martial arts styles, I have not seen them use a scoring much like that. Their scoring tends to be more descriptive. They point at the person and indicate a motion with their hands, okay? Now, Dr. Welsing has also covered, but she's covered the martial sport of boxing in the ISIS papers. I do believe she did cover boxing. So I'm not going to go into boxing. She's talked about the gloves being representative, the dark-colored gloves being representative of the testicles, still genetic material, and they're pummeling each other with these puffy, big gloves, and the punches tend to originate from the waist. That's another thing. The key to power in the martial arts, especially when it comes to punching and kicking, it emanates from the waist. Why does it emanate from the waist? Physics, yes. Very powerful. It is very powerful physics. It also could be, and if there's an obsession with power from the waist, power from the hips, power from the waist, power from the hips in the striking martial arts. Could that be an obsession with propagation of genetic material? Because fighting and sexual reproduction are very close drives, in my opinion, and they're very primal and animal drives. So, this is the Cress theory, in my opinion, applied to martial arts. Most coveted belt, black belt. Even the red and white belts, or the red belt, they are still considered black belt ranks. They are called blah, blah, blah degree black belt. Blah, blah, blah degree black belt. If you look at the charts for a lot of systems, Those that use red and white, you still have a choice when you get to the supreme levels. You can still wear a black belt to indicate that. It's either, like if it's like a 8th or 9th degree black belt, they'll typically, in most styles, may have an option for red. It's still considered a black belt. Let's say if a school or style gives out red belt at 8th or 9th degree, they are still referred to as a 8th or 9th degree black belt, but they wear a red belt or a red or white belt. So the belt as a symbol of the male phallus, powerful black belt. Usually the only acceptable colors worn for martial arts uniforms, they tend to be white or black. Pink, only for women. Pink only for women. Any other color tends to be looked down upon. You may see an off-white, but it's still considered white. So typically the only colors I see are white, blue, black, and maybe pink. You may see a camouflage one, but that tends to be the exception than the rule. And contrary to what a lot of people will say, the model of the martial arts that we practice as we know them, they come from out of Japan. Even if other Asian countries have their influence, because we know China has the martial arts too. But when we're talking about the martial arts that use belts, those belty styles, if you want to call them that, those belts wearing styles, that's Japan or Japanese influence. And I argue, and especially if you want to look at how they're treating the Miss Japan of what year is this, 2015? The Miss Japan of 2015, they're looking down upon her because she has melanin. More melanin than most Japanese people because she's black. That shows a white supremacist attitude. So you can say that these martial arts, where the structure tends to be Japanese, from a culture of people who, as soon as they encountered the racist white supremacists, they decided to become racist white supremacists, or as close to them as they could get. They emulated and adopted the thought patterns of racist white supremacy. That's why we have the black belt in the martial arts, a sought-after symbol of power. This is my presentation of Cress theory and martial arts. I would love to hear some opinions on it, so please make some counter videos. I would prefer that than comments telling me I'm crazy. I'll read them and laugh, but I would like to hear some more discussion on this. Open fist, Tulu, signing out. Peace.